Hello and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Russia's global military commitments look increasingly stretched with its full-scale war in Ukraine, supporting regimes across Africa and increasing demands in Syria, where reports suggest that rebel advances are now forcing pro-Damascus forces to retreat and even threatening Moscow's key naval base at Tartus on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. The Russian state budget for next year includes a 25% hike in military spending, but will be the most secretive in post-Soviet history, with almost a third of all spending closed to public scrutiny. How much longer can Russia sustain this level of military commitment? Well, to explore this question, we're joined by Nicolas Tenzer. He's Chairman, Centre for Study and Research on Political Decisions. Mr. Tenzer, welcome to TVP World. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. So, Russia's got its fingers in a lot of pies in a lot of countries. Is it finding itself overstretched?
Well, basically, I think that at the long run, Russia cannot sustain this effort, obviously. But the problem is that for probably 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I don't know, it is still capable if there is no counterweight of afforded by the allies to pursue basically its offensive in multiple fronts. We see that in Ukraine because, unfortunately, Russia is not fully defeated in Ukraine right now. It has still the possibility to launch a lot of missiles, drones against the Russian cities, against also the Ukrainian militaries, and to pursue, its crimes against humanity. We see that also in Georgia, where right now we have a Russian captured state, in Georgia with the Jordan Dream Party. It still has a presence in Africa. And the good news is that probably it cannot have a sustained presence in Syria. And that shows, obviously, that Russia, if we have the willingness to do so, can be defeated. So basically, I think Russia is a threat for the 3 or 4 years. Everything depends on the true commitment of the allies to defeat Russia everywhere. And I think that's a cool question. I think we have basically to link what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Belarus, what happened in Georgia, what happened in Syria, in many African countries, also in some countries in Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, etc. Basically, and we must have a plan. We must have a plan. We must have a long-time vision. And that's, I think, the only one way through which we can certainly defeat Russia, as I say.
Understood. So we need a long-term vision. But there was something you said which was rather interesting. You said Russia is still capable. I find that difficult to understand how. Their oil exports are restricted, oil and gas. Their dealings on the global financial markets equally restricted. They don't have enough people. They're calling soldiers in from North Korea to come and fight in Ukraine. They're moving their mercenaries in Africa from one country to another. Surely all of these things must be making an impact on their ability to wage war on so many fronts.
Well, I think that basically, first of all, we don't have a full-fledged sanction packages right now. We have improved, the sanctions. We are fighting against the circumvention of sanctions by other states. Could be the Emirates, could be India, could be China, but basically not enough. We know that some European countries are still buying Russian gas or Russian LNG, for instance. We are still buying also some nuclear materials from Russia. And as we say, basically, Russia still have allies. Namely Iran, North Korea, China, up to a certain point. And when you have a leader, the war criminal Vladimir Putin, who is still able to force its country to spend, I mean, as much money, in the military, which is fully detrimental to the society in Russia, to the infrastructure, to schools, transport, hospitals, everything else. Basically, it could last. And so basically, what we have certainly to do is to increase the sanctions, and especially the conventional sanctions. We have certainly also to step in dramatically in our effort to support the Ukrainian military. Otherwise, basically, Putin doesn't care about his people. We saw that all the attacks, on Ukraine, especially during the last months, has a huge cost. Probably 700,000 servicemen from Russia died or severely wounded. But for Putin, even if we had 1 million or 2 million soldiers killed or wounded, basically it doesn't matter to him. The Russian society has absolutely no willingness, no commitment to revolt against Putin regime. That's why, basically, it could last during a certain time.
Understood. So he believes he can count on civil society not to make too much of a fuss, despite the losses on the battlefield. Tell me your thoughts on Syria. I mean, Russia, since the rebels have overrun Aleppo, Russia has pulled its ships out of the port of Tartus, its repair base on the Mediterranean. What does that signify to you?
First of all, basically, we perfectly know that Russia has withdrawn some of its troops, in Syria. And so did Iran, and especially Hezbollah, which is, of course, Iran's proxy, as we know, because of the war and the attacks of Israel against Hezbollah. And it shows that the Assad regime is not able on its own to support the war effort. We know that it's a failed state, fully disorganized, completely corrupted, who earned a lot of money through the sale of huge drug, which is Captagon. And the problem is for Russia that Russia is probably still able to strike. It cannot oppose basically the huge surge of the Syrian rebels right now, which is also very interesting because it shows that the Syrian people by themselves, without any support, even if probably Turkey gave its green light, but is not supporting the rebels very much, are able to defeat a huge power when it shows some sign of weakness. And I think that could be a turning point because if Assad regime is dethroned, it will be a huge loss, of course, for Russia and for Iran. And it could be up to a certain point, a turning point, not only in the Middle East, but also for Europe as well.
A turning point in global politics as a result of the loss of Assad's regime. What about in Africa, where we see that the numbers of mercenaries that Russia employs is dramatically reduced? I guess that means that they have less and less control over the natural resources that they have been availing themselves of. How do you expect that to play out?
Well, basically, I think in Africa, it's partly a different story. First of all, the thing that we can underline is that basically, if Russia let Assad fall, it will be a huge signal, a very important signal also to all the junta, military junta in Africa supported by Russia, that they can have absolutely no confidence in Russia supporting their leaders. And that's a sign of weakness, which is certainly very much welcome. The second point is that, very unfortunately, we still have Russian presence, even if not that heavy as before. And one of the purposes of Russia is not only certainly to support these regimes, but basically, as everywhere, to create a kind of chaos. Because of this chaos that we are witnessing in Africa right now, you could have a kind of reinforcements of all the jihadi groups that can certainly threaten Europe. Because if we have more failed states, in Africa, more turmoil in Africa, it will be very bad omen for the security of the European countries.
Indeed it would. Now, very briefly, in the last few seconds we have left, How important is China to Russia's continued resilience, apart from the fact that China buys oil and gas from Russia?
Well, first of all, you have a kind of support, I mean, also military support to Russia offered by Beijing. And also, I think that you had a huge change, also with Xi Jinping in power. Xi Jinping is not a guy like, let's say, Hu Jintao or Jiang Zemin, the previous Chinese leaders. Its purpose is basically to destroy the world order, not only to change the world order according to its own interest, but also to put it down. And I think that there is a new ideology in the Communist Party right now since 10 years that could be very aligned finally with Russian ideology as well. So basically both are playing against the West. Certainly China is not a full ally of Russia, but what Russia is doing now, especially in Ukraine, serve China's long-term interest in terms of ideological interest, unfortunately.
Okay, well, lots of moving pieces. We're watching it very closely. Thank you very much for your analysis, Mr. Nicolas Tenzer. Have a good day, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.